here we are. This is episode number 115 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, being recorded on a bit of a chilly night, actually, on Monday, June 10th, 2024, at 8:51 p.m. It was nice out all day today, a beautiful, beautiful breeze in the air. The sun was really shining down. It was kind of a faint breeze, but very warm as well. And as the sun goes down and the stars go up, man, it's just like, my gosh, you really want to get underneath those blankets and really just kind of succumb to the coziness. These are the nights that you really live for when you're not going out, you're staying in. You're watching a film, you're getting your work done, you go to bed, you get a book. It's just been totally great, man. It's been just great these past couple days, just getting into bed at the end of the night and just, falling asleep to a book. I'm still working on that John Schlesinger book, so that's just a wonderful read so far. I'm not trying to rush through that, really kind of taking my time, and it's really making me kind of step back and evaluate John Schlesinger's films, which I have and have not seen. I often forget sometimes which ones I have and haven't seen. Actually, funnily enough, recently, I, unbeknownst to me, had rewatched A Woman is a Woman by Jean-Luc Godard, which was from 1961. And even before it came up, I was like, have I seen this film? I'm so sure that, I don't know, I think I have seen this film. During this era, he's making these really silly comedies, but still intellectual. His inspirations are there with a lot of slapstick, and as well his editing, having a lot of the jokes just be simply the edits of characters doing something. But anyways, it's a very good film. But I'm watching, I'm like, everything about this film is so familiar, and then I go to log it on Letterboxd in the night, and it says re-log, and I go, oh, I have seen this film before, okay. I think at this point I may have seen all of the early Godard feature films. I'd be very curious, actually, to see which ones I might be missing out on. And actually, funnily enough, I was talking about the partner label titles. It had to have been last week, and they have this wonderful collection, which I had to pick up, called Six in Paris. And this says, in 1965, young producer Barbet Schroeder supplied a 16mm camera along with color film stock to 6 friends and asked them each to make a short film about a Parisian neighborhood. And yeah, Godard has one of his in there, Montparnasse and L'Evoli. Oh man, it's just a wonderful collection of filmmakers here. You have Jean Duché, Jean Rouch, Jean-Daniel Paulet, Eric Rohmer, of course Jean-Luc Godard, and Claude Chabrol. So all 6 wonderful, wonderful filmmakers. So I'm going to be on this set like white on rice. But what I was saying before with early Godard's work, at least up to a point, because then there comes a point where he's done so many films. And he has so many different eras, which is so fascinating. His more comedic eras, his more political eras, his more almost philosophical eras. His later work I'm a little less familiar with, admittedly, but I have seen, in terms of his features, of course, I've seen Breathless. I've seen A Woman is a Woman. I've seen Vivre sa vie, which is actually one of my very favorites of his. I have seen The Little Soldier. I've not seen The Carabiners, The Carabiners. I'm not actually super familiar with this one. Interesting. Yeah, I've not seen this one. And then, of course, Contempt, which is one of his best. Band of Outsiders, which is great. A Married Woman, which is great. Alphaville, which is great, which is actually coming to 4K soon. Pierre the Fool, which is my favorite of his work. Masculine and Feminine, which I've seen. I have not seen Made in USA. I thought I did. And also 2 or 3 things I know about her I've not seen either. The Chinese I've seen. And Weekend, which is just one of my favorite things I watched last year. I think Weekend was the last of his major films I've seen. So I really just have to see Made in USA, as well as... what was it? The Carabiners. I'm probably saying that incorrectly. And some of his later stuff I've kind of scattered seen. I've seen some of his work. Like, what's that? Oh gosh, what the hell's the name of that film with? I'm gonna get it right here. Oh, Woe Is Me. Even though he's uncredited for it, that was Gerard Depardieu in that. It was a very interesting film. I'm curious to rewatch it. I remember being a little underwhelmed when I first watched it, not really knowing what to make of it. The Image Book, which was his last feature, and kind of scattered films about that. So it's been really great kind of going through a lot of his films and seeing the different eras of his work. Actually, I have a Blu-ray of Every Man for Himself, which I have not seen, and I have a Blu-ray of, what the hell is the name of that film? The Joy of Learning from 1969. So I have not seen that, but I have the Blu-ray of that, so that'll be watched in due time. But it is just really wonderful to kind of dive into his work, and I kind of went off on a little tangent there about Godard. I've talked about him many, many times on the show. I've also seen some of his shorts. I've seen like A Flirtatious Woman from 1955, which was his first short, and whatever the one is that he did with Agnes Varda, where she gave him the camera. I am completely blanking on what that name was, and he's done so many shorts as well that it is just such a task to try to find. Yeah, what the hell? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't Godard. I might be mixing it up with somebody else. Doesn't matter. Either way. Okay. Recently, when I was talking about kind of films that had come out in 2024, at least that I'd seen theatrically in 2024, when I did my look through, I forgot to mention this film. And then I said, all right, next week I'm going to mention that film. And then the last week I forgot to mention the film as well. And I said, damn, man, this is probably one of my, up there, one of my favorite things I've seen this year. This is definitely top 2 or top 3, and I'm not going to do a top 2, top 3. I'm just saying in terms of if it came to, certain films this year that I'm really thinking back to and really just like, wow, those are incredible films. I'm thinking of like Menu Plaisir and Perfect Days, and The Monk and the Gun, and I completely forgot to mention The Taste of Things, which is just a beautiful film from filmmaker An Hung Tran, who I've only seen one of his other work, which was The Scent of Green Papaya from 1993, although I do remember when Norwegian Wood came out in 2010. He was only doing films every couple of years or so, but this was his newest one, which I saw earlier this year with Juliette Binoche and Benoit Magimel. And I thought, damn, man, this Benoit Magimel guy, who is this man? And I looked at his IMDb, and I was like, my gosh, he was the main character in The Piano Teacher. And I thought, my gosh, I didn't even make the connection. You could say, of course not, that was 2001, this is 2024, probably filmed in 22, 23, I get it, but man, it is completely wild to kind of make that connection of going, wow, I, didn't even know that was him. But The Taste of Things, a real cozy film that you kind of just surrender yourself to these characters in this small setting. We have these this gourmet chef, these two of them, Eugenie and Dodin. I apologize, it's been a couple months, so if I get some of the names wrong and some of the information wrong, forgive me, but played by Juliette Binoche and Benoit Magimel. And they are working in, what was it they were working in? I forgot what exactly. They're working in this in this house. I think they were living together in this house, and they have people coming over, and they were cooking food for them. So you have these really great sequences of them cooking all this food. I mean, it's sort of like, funnily enough, I think, I may have even mentioned this when I was talking about Menu Plaisir, and if I didn't, which you can go back and listen to that episode, if I did, then this makes, because I saw these two films around the same time. I think probably about a week or so apart, if that, maybe 2 weeks. But they have just these great sequences of just us following these chefs making these entrees. These are experts at their craft, knowing what they're doing. We're trusting them as the audience to really kind of know what it is they're doing. And of course, they're going to know what they're doing because this is the kind of film where we're following these people who are masters at their craft. But we have this friendship between Eugenie and Doden, I'm just gonna say the actors' names because I'm gonna probably get this incorrect, and the complicated sort of friendship where Benoit's character feels romantic feelings for her, but she is resistant and doesn't really want to commit to him. And what's interesting is that that's really kind of one part of the film. And then the second part of the film takes on another life of its own and becomes very endearing in its own right. It's not exactly a one-half, two-half kind of picture, but it is in a way where there's enough of a drastic, maybe not necessarily drastic, let me rephrase that. There's enough of a narrative shift where it becomes not just an act of the film, but a whole part of the film itself, where it becomes a much bigger part than just being a second or third act. It is the entire next part of the story, and it's just so fascinating to watch. It's a period piece as well to watch these characters eating this delicious food, these loving relationships of people who care for each other, people who relate to one another over the delicacies of food and of cooking, and it's just such a wonderful, wonderful film that I just am baffled that I forgot to even mention previously. And I wanted to also mention, I was on Canopy, and I saw that The Monk and the Gun is now streaming on there, which is wonderful to see. Hopefully, when people go on Canopy and they see that pop up, they will take the chance on such a terrific film. And The Taste of Things as well is not... It's available to rent. It's streaming on Acorn and AMC Plus. But keep an eye out for it. It's a wonderful film. I've seen just so many wonderful films this year. So many really kind of evocative films that really stick with you and leave a far more lasting impression than some of the just kind of nauseating kind of noise fests that are so prevalent in contemporary theatrical cinema. Some of which I do enjoy, of course. Others, I even the ones I enjoy, I typically, at least contemporarily, oftentimes don't stick with me in terms of any kind of long-lasting sort of meaningfulness, other than just an amusement park sake of enjoyment, of just going, that was enjoyable spectacle, but it does not leave any kind of long-lasting impression. It's like fast food. Fast food is fine, but I need something a bit more substance. I need something a bit more of a filmmaking craft in this, which will lead right into the discussion of, when it comes to the contemporary, we're going back to 1998. It says 98, but I'm not actually sure if this was the year or not. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. It was 98. And part of the reason why I stopped doing the list videos is because there were films that would come along which I know I don't have the time to watch every single film from a certain year, nor would I devote myself to watching every single film for a year. There are so many films and so many artistic mediums to consume that just limiting yourself to one type of thing is just not going to happen, man. Or else this film would have been on the list, undoubtedly. It's a film that reminds me of the importance of the theatrical experience. From 98 is Tom Tykwer's film. I don't know if it was his film debut. However, this was definitely the film to kind of put him on the map and to get people's attention of him. So he had directed three previous feature films before this, as well as a short, but his 1998 adrenaline-filled, techno music blasting roller coaster ride, Run, Lola Run, which was a film that I had seen previously at home, and while I enjoyed it, it didn't, and I appreciated it on a filmmaking level. I think because I may have been looking for something more, that ultimately I wound up not necessarily being disappointed, because that's a completely ridiculous thing to have any kind of expectations. when you're going into any kind of film. You know, it's like I can't be disappointed if I didn't think it was going to be good or bad. I'm there to watch the film and take in whatever may come my way. But upon a rewatch of this theatrically, which is currently theatrically re-released for a 4K restoration. Now, I don't know who did the restoration on this, so I'd be very interested to see who actually puts this one out when the time does come. Because I think it might actually already be out on 4K in one of those box sets from... Or maybe not, actually. I don't know. I'm thinking about the Columbia Pictures box sets where they'll put out a couple of 4K exclusive titles in there and then not release them individually until later. Like I know they did that with Taxi Driver, and that's getting an individual 4K, and SLC Punk was a 4K in that box set, which hasn't even had a Blu-ray, to my knowledge. I think that's a film that's been tricky with the rights. I would assume because of the music, because it's a bunch of punk music and stuff. But I'm definitely not sure. But either way, so maybe this doesn't have a 4K. I really don't know. But it's a film that is benefited from a theatrical rewatch, where in the first 10 minutes, first 5 minutes, I was just completely sucked into the film in a way that only a film could do that, by letting yourself surrender to the screen and taking in a palette of an audio and visual sort of experience. It really kind of lets the film kind of suck you in. It's a wonderful film. It's the story of this. It's a German film, I should say. Franka Potent, who plays the character Lola. Right off the bat, we get the exposition out of the way. And what's interesting that I like about the film is that while it does have this constant momentum and it's constantly moving and has a very vibrant soundtrack, which I'll get into, even during the downtime sequences, even when we're learning about some of the other characters in her life, we're getting the exposition, the film is always doing something interesting, whether that be the camera constantly moving or various sound effects or various things like they'll have a thing where Lola will scream and it'll actually shatter the glass. And what's interesting is that when I'm talking about films being energetic and films having a sort of a real kind of strong like accelerated feeling where you're constantly going, it's not in a way where there's constantly being cuts, and it's not nauseating, which is the important thing. Is that it's just that the camera is constantly moving, almost always. I mean, there's hardly any frames in this film, or hardly any shots in the film, I should say, where it's not moving around at all. Even if it's just a dialogue sequence between two characters, they're always doing something with it. The editing of this film is very kind of quick, a lot of quick cuts, a lot of quick boom, boom, boom. There's a really great kind of running bit where, no pun intended, where whenever Lola bumps into certain people that we'll see now how their lives are affected because of this, of what eventually becomes of them after Lola is gone. But the plot is that Lola's boyfriend he was tasked with delivering $100,000 or Deutschmarks, however the conversion rate is, let alone for 1998 to 2024 standards. Anyways, this bag of money, this guy Manny, he accidentally leaves the bag on the train, and he's screwed, man. This guy's gonna come after him, and he's saying like, "Hey, man, he's talking to Lola. He's like, Lola, man, I'm screwed. There's no way I'm gonna be able to get this money back to this guy. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go into the supermarket and I'm going to have to rob it, man. And if you're not here in the next 20 minutes, then that's it, man. Because she's known for being on time. She's partially to blame for him being in the situation. He shouldn't be in the situation at all, but she didn't really hold up her end of the bargain. Things happen, man. They talk about that. So she's got 20 minutes to get down to figure it out, man, before he makes an even bigger mistake. And you're saying to yourself, Dan, what the hell? 20 minutes? This is a feature film. I'm telling you, man, this is an 80-minute film. You gotta watch the film, man, because part of the fun of watching it is seeing what the film does. The film plays by its own set of rules, so it's not interested in any kind of reality. It's not interested in any sort of tangible sort of tied to a clock, because I'm sure you sit back and you go, well, wait a minute, this has been over 20 minutes, so there's no way she could do this. Or if you're watching the third act of the film, you're going, oh my, how lucky can a person be? This is ridiculous. You go, brother, this film has set up its own universe where these characters can do all these different things in a way where it plays like a cartoon, and intentionally so. Because even the opening credits of the film are really stand out in their own right. We have these mug shots of all these actors and their names and the characters' names. And you have these animated sequences of Lola running down the hallway and smashing the credits of the film. And we see her running down the stairs, and there's a guy on the stairs with a dog. And is he gonna push his leg out or hold his leg out? Is the dog gonna bark at him? What the hell's going on? It's a film that I really think benefits from a large screen and, more importantly, a good sound system, because that's one thing that really stood out this time, is that even though the techno soundtrack is so apparent in any viewing of this, if you're watching this in an auditorium and you feel the bass kind of pumping through the speakers and you really feel the energy kind of bouncing off the walls, man, the audience as one, as a collective, watching these sequences, it really kind of puts you into this mindset of like, all right, I'm being taken on this ride. I'm seeing a film that I haven't seen before. You know, you're not going to see a Hollywood film of the time doing something like this. You're going to see these filmmakers who are doing these really kind of interesting filmmaker-driven ideas. You know, it's just, I think the 90s in particular were just such a haven of such these interesting new and upcoming filmmakers who were just doing really cool, almost simple kind of stuff, but it was what they were doing with them. I mean, that book I was mentioning a while ago, Down and Dirty Pictures, The Rise of Sundance by Peter Bisklund, is just a great look into this time and sort of the frustrations that people like Robert Redford were having at this new generation of filmmakers, and all the just filmmakers that were coming out of the late 80s into the into the 90s, I should say, and doing their own thing, and the successes of films like this and of the Blair Witch Project and upcoming auteurs like Quentin Tarantino and even Steven Soderbergh, who started out in the late 80s, but then it's interesting the career path he took, where people almost kind of turned their back to him when he started to do somewhat more commercial films, where he has this breakout, which is still my favorite film of his, which is Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which is a wonderful film, but this weird kind of resistance that people had to him, where they're like, they almost kind of want him to fail because he's not staying underground, or this or that. You know, it reminds me of when I was reading the sections in the Luis Bunuel autobiography, My Last Sigh, and the earlier days when Bunuel was doing more experimental work with Salvador Dali and doing these very cool kind of underground experimental films, and when he started to get more mainstream, kind of, not even necessarily mainstream, but when he started to get into like the newspapers and stuff and getting more talk, the surrealists at the time were, they didn't want him. They were almost like, you know, because he got successful, he was somehow turning his back to them. And Bunuel is so interesting because throughout his entire career, even at the highest of his commercial successes, he was always doing this very interesting, surreal work. I mean, I think people kind of maybe have an idea of either his very surrealist stuff or his final work, but there are those films like Viridiana, which have those elements, but I think are still rooted in being a film first, and that experimental surrealist stuff almost second. I mean, I guess perhaps even The Exterminating Angel to a point, I think that has the absurdities of something closer to probably like Discreet Charm of the bourgeoisie, but I think that you could enjoy different eras of Bunuel and not enjoy others. Kind of what I'm talking about with Godard. You can be a fan of maybe some of his later, more, not even necessarily political, I'm thinking later, like 80s and all that, you know, but I'm saying like you can enjoy a film like Weekend and not be a fan of, you know, like A Woman is a Woman, because they are different kinds of films, or anything of the sort, you know. Like, so I really kind of like it when filmmakers kind of go through these different periods and different cycles, and whether or not it works out or not is completely up to, you know, a subjective opinion. which that's a redundant thing to say. A subjective opinion. That's like calling something an objective fact. That's ridiculous, man. But at the same time, it is great to kind of see. I'd rather see that. I'd rather see a filmmaker who tries something different and fails, but has something interesting come out of it, than a filmmaker who may just make the same movie 100 times. It's just completely ridiculous. It's sort of like, what do you're so concerned with playing it safe and appeasing that you're appeasing your audience that you wouldn't dare kind of divert, or, I mean, unless that's what you want to do, then hey, God bless you, man. You're the one who's directing this picture. But I mean, you look at like Scorsese or something like that, man. It's like, anyone going to be, if anyone's talking about him making the same movie, it's just completely ridiculous. It's like, brother, what have you even seen from him, man? This is a filmmaker who has gone through so many different eras and cycles and periods of his time, but you focus on only a couple films that have the similarities, and you go, oh, well, he only makes this kind of film. It's just completely ridiculous, man. It's like, you're not going to talk about New York, New York. You're not going to talk about the King of Comedy. You're not going to talk about Kundun. You're not going to talk about The Age of Innocence. It's like, oh, but you only want to talk about the same 5 movies that have some similarities. It's just completely ridiculous, man. And anyways, I kind of went off on a tyrant there, or a side tangent, not a tyrant. But it's also interesting as well. I'm looking at the director's work, Tom Tykwer, or Tykwer. I don't know how to say that name. And I was like, what the hell did he do after this? Because I feel like I hadn't really heard that name a whole lot. And he had an interesting kind of career after this. Some of the films he was doing. He did, his most follow-up to this was The Princess and the Warrior from 2000. Then he did Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, which I still haven't seen. That's been on my watch list for a very long time. He did that Clive Owen film, The International, 2009, which I never saw. I didn't even know that he did Cloud Atlas until I looked at it recently. I thought that was a film by the Wachowskis, but I think it was just they wrote it or something. I mean, I guess they are co-directors on this. Okay, you have Tom Tykwer, Lana Wachowski, and then Lily Wachowski. So I guess I thought it was just exclusively their films. But then he also did some recent kind of stuff. He did A Hologram for the King with Tom Hanks in 2016. It's just interesting. He's doing different kind of things. He's not just doing these kind of action films, even though he's so good at it. And I think that there are certain films. This is interesting here. Translated the parts of Tarantino's screenplay for Inglourious Basterds had to be in German language. That's interesting. That's very cool. Well, man, that's very cool. I mean, that's why the theatrical experience in general, I think, is just so important. And it's easier said than done. I've said it before. Here's me not silencing my telephone. We all have different circumstances. We all have different responsibilities, personal and financial. It is just, I hope that with the contemporary age of streaming, where, I mean, I saw Dune Part 2, and then a month later it was on HBO Max. I mean, that's a film that's meant to be seen theatrically. That's made for that. I understand that, again, some people don't live close to a cinema. Some people just can't afford to go to the cinema. I completely understand that, and I don't want anybody listening to think I'm making some sort of blanket statement on that. That'd be a completely ridiculous thing to kind of make these presumptions about everyone. That's just a ridiculous thing to say, and anyone making presumptions like that, or assumptions, they just don't know what they're talking about. But I do think that there is a bit of a comfortability of people going, well, I'll wait for streaming on this, whereas a film like this, seeing it theatrically, I just had so altered my opinion on the film, where I went from liking it and respecting it to just straight up loving it. I mean, this was one of my favorite theatrical watches. I just had such a joyous time watching this with an audience and really getting into the film. And at the end, the final lines of the film made the audience members laugh, and that's just so great, man. It really kind of puts into perspective how important the communal experience really is. I mean, there are some films you do not want to watch with an audience. If you have a guy who's like, chewing on popcorn and sucking down cherry Coke while you're watching a Bellatar film, then maybe you might want to rethink kind of where you're at. But if I'm watching Lola Run and I'm seeing it with an audience, man, that's the way to go, man. But it's all subjective. You can completely disagree, and that's totally fine. This ain't no gospel, man. This is just my perspective and my experiences up to this point. Speaking up to this point, we're at the end of the show. So thank you guys so much. There's so much to do, man. The days are beautiful out. Don't waste them. Go outside. Work on your art. Work on your craft. Don't get distracted by social nonsense. People are going to want to bring you to X, Y, and Z. Make sure you're focused on A, B, and C. All right, that's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for listening.